All right, everybody, welcome back. Johnny Azir here, the best beard in radio, and you're listening to the Warfighter Eye. This is hour number 3 of today's show, and it's been a whirlwind show. We've been talking about so many issues, so many huge things, and we're about to be joined by a really great guest, somebody I'm really excited to hear from, and to have some pretty pointed conversation with. His name is Alex Meluskey, and he is running out in Arizona to unseat John McCain. So this is that battle of the outsider versus the establishment type candidate. And, I've talked a lot about John McCain on this show. I would never take away anything from his service to the country. But the fact is, as he's been in power for so long, he's time and time again turned his back on veterans. And there's a lot of folks in our community that say it's time for this guy to go. So let's go to the phones here, and we'll welcome Alex to the program.
Appreciate it being on the show. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for spending some time with us. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. Again, thank you for coming on with us, and we've got a ton of stuff to get to, and I know you're really busy, so let's kind of dive right into everything. Real quick here, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about you?
All right. My name is Alex Meluskey. I was the first filed Republican candidate in the race here in Arizona, running against John McCain. I'm a family man, been married over 20 years, have 2 children, 19 and 17. I'm also a successful businessman, self-made, started it myself, even though the federal government would like to claim otherwise.
Right.
Precinct committeeman, syndicated radio talk host, and the fair tax director here in Arizona.
Well, fantastic. And so you're getting into politics here, and it sounds like you have a pretty wide and varied background. Talk to us a little bit about your motivation to getting into politics, because I mean the political landscape right now has just been absolutely crazy, and some folks out there say, why would anybody want to jump into this fight?
Well, the bottom line is when you look at it, it would seem like it would be insane to get involved in politics, because when you look at it, all I see in my eyes is either ineptitude or corruption, and it's a combination of both. But I can't turn my back on my country, and I can't turn my back on my children and say, hey, it's your problem, because you know what? That's not what our founders did.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate that that kind of take and that sort of approach to it. And so getting into politics is never really an easy task, and like so many people, they feel a need to do it or whatever. But you're entering a very difficult race. It could be seen as an uphill battle, going up against a guy that's been in power for what 33, 34 years now, and John McCain. What's that like, having to face somebody who's been involved at the political, the national political level for so long?
I've got to say it's actually more empowering than not. If somebody had been in there for 2 years, then you'd say, okay, well, maybe their ideas just haven't come into fruition. Maybe they just haven't been able to get their points across. But I think after 33 and a half years, and you were right on, Johnny, John McCain just hasn't gotten it, and he's too removed from the population, too removed from civilization to think that he really knows what we're all thinking. I mean, Thomas Jefferson got it correctly. We need to pull our representation from the people. People need to put down their arms. People need to put down their plows. People need to put down their stethoscope, their whatever. In my case, put down the printing press and go to Washington and help to create or eliminate laws and then go back and live under them. It's John McCain has been in office too long in my eyes. The resonating message I get from people when I go around the states is they say is that it is time. It absolutely is time, and it's a very, very unique election cycle. You can imagine. I mean, obviously, look, the last 2 that were essentially standing in the Republican side of the party were a man who had never run for any political office, and then the other man who just bowed out yesterday, Ted Cruz. He's currently holding his first ever elected position. So people around this country are sick and tired of establishment telling them what to do and not taking the chains off to let them live their lives. And it's very evident here in Arizona, where 15% of Arizonans' number one issue is they want an outsider who's never held an elected political position before and is also a successful businessman. That's me. I'm the only one. So
well, you know,
I get that.
Yeah, you hit on a number of different things, and I think you're spot on. You know, if you look at the last, not even just this election cycle, but the midterm elections too. I mean, it was that was seen as a rebuke to President Obama's policies and all that, where Republicans swept in waves, and now with like you mentioned with Donald Trump, so much of his support I feel comes from people who are just tired of the same old same, and I think that's the voice of the people needs to be heard, and just keeps getting louder and louder and louder.
Absolutely. You wonder if we're being heard. Are we being heard? I don't know, but I absolutely know that I'm not very quiet. I've got to tell you, Johnny, I have a loud voice. I'm civil. You're not going to hear me being rude to other people, but I think a lot of our elected officials have forgotten that they are servants to the people, that they are representing the people and not special interests, not party leadership, but they have to go with the voice for the people. And, whatever it may be, they have to hold firm. And we don't have that. We absolutely don't have that. And I see it in so many different ways and forms of government that John McCain has let us down when it comes to taxation, when it comes to our veterans, when it comes to our foreign affairs. It's just utter lack of either real power, which you would think he had power to get good things done for the people, or he's just resigned to the fact that it doesn't matter anymore. I don't know, but whatever it is, I don't accept it.
No, and the people shouldn't accept it. It's one of those things where, John McCain is a prime example. Here's a guy who, he was a warfighter, he's a veteran, he's got a great story, he had service to this country, and that's phenomenal. But then he got into power, and again, 34 years almost, and what has he done? Time and time again, he's backtracked on his long-standing policies, his beliefs, turned his back over and over again on veterans, and I'd like to get to that in just a moment here. But this wave of quote unquote establishment people, they get in power and they're there for 20, 30 years, and I always ask when these people come up for re-election, what have you done lately? And they always seem to come up with these great ideas right before an election. Well, where was that idea 10, 15 years ago? You know what I mean?
Well, where's that idea going to be in a year?
Right, exactly.
Because I've heard it so many times. John McCain's famous for saying, build the dang fence, or he shows up everywhere during election year. He starts to actually make a little bit of traction for our veterans in the VA hospital. He starts talking about the rights of the people. And then, of course, he gets elected, and it's crickets. No, we can't have that. I mean, we need to get rid of anybody who claims they're going to do something and then shuts up afterwards. If I see the person representing me actually fighting for me, even if I know they're running into brick walls, if I see them getting up and running into that brick wall again and again and again and again, I know they're eventually going to chip away at it and break it down. Or at least I know that they're going there and they're making the greatest efforts for me. But John McCain, I think he just sits in front of the wall and stares at it.
It sure seems that way, and it's no more poignant than when we talk about veterans issues. And of course, this is Warfighter Radio, and our core constituency here is veterans from all over the world, and these issues are top of our list. Things like the VA, things like the epidemic of warfighter suicide. I mean, the list is a mile long, and John McCain, he's one of those guys that he has experience. He has that background of being a veteran, and he just doesn't get it done for us. And all these problems under the VA have happened while he's been in power. And look no further than him pointing to Bernie Sanders and saying, "Hey, Bernie was the guy who was getting stuff done at the VA." I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Right, it is ridiculous. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk for a moment about my contract. But I have a contract with America's veterans and their families. But before I do so, I want to let everybody know that's listening, all veterans, all family members of veterans, I love you. I really do. I understand that freedom is not free, and I do not accept that anybody that has taken an oath to defend me and my family from those that would do me harm domestically and abroad and then punish them has to come back after they have served, after they have retired, and have to ask for help. to beg for help. I do not accept that. May I discuss my contract just a little bit, Johnny, or no?
No, absolutely. I think this is absolutely critical, and it's one of the things that I really like of what you're doing.
I'm dumbfounded that I am the first candidate for any federal office that I know of that has ever had a contract with America's veterans and their families. I think it's long past time. I couldn't believe it when my Veterans Coalition, which is made up of men and women who have served in just about every theater of combat from every single branch, mother of prisoner of war. I couldn't believe that they came to me and said, Alex, would you sign a contract or work out a contract with us for America's veterans and their families? And I said, absolutely. And my coalition was a little bit shocked that I said yes. He said, we've asked other congressmen and other senators to do so, and they just ignore us. I'm like, why?
It seems like a no-brainer. Yeah.
It is a no-brainer, but they sent it to me, and I sent it back, and I said, not strong enough, and I think I kind of threw them for a loop. So I added a few things, but the bottom line is, if there is a problem, you fix it. I'm a businessman. You fix it. If something's wrong with your children, you either ignore them and it gets worse, or you deal with the problem, you fix it. You solve it. You cure it. With our veterans and their families, they are not getting taken care of. Now, I have a 21-point plan, folks. You can go to my website, Meluskey.com, and look under Coalition, look under Veterans. It's up there. You can always email us, and I'll get it to you if you want a copy, a PDF copy. We have probably 500,000 copies floating around the state of Arizona right now. But just so you know where I am with this, bullet point number 2 on my contract is that I'm going to be putting my offices, my Senate offices, in the VA hospitals. That way you know I'm not going to run, I'm not going to hide from anything. But secondly, which is not in my contract, which is important for you to know right here and now, this contract is not a campaign pledge. This is a life pledge. I don't take life pledges that often, folks. You know, with God, my wife, and my kids. That's about it. But I've made this pledge, and I'll say it on air. I'll say it everywhere. I will fight for this contract until I take my last breath.
Absolutely.
You do it for me. I've got to do it for you.
I love it. And, you're right. It's so bizarre that that's something so simple as, hey, let's make a contract with our country's veterans. And it harkens back to, Newt Gingrich's contract with America, which I was a huge fan of and big fan of his. How has the response been to what you're saying within the veteran community that you've dealt with?
Overall, very, very positive. Sometimes people will look at it and they'll say, "Well, Alex, could we add this?" Well, absolutely, we can add it. This is a true living document that can be expanded and made more complete. And some of our bullet points were a little bit loose with what we're explaining because we want to cover everything. And people say this is a very, very large-reaching contract. You sure you're going to be able to do all this? We're going to fight to get it all done. Absolutely. There's no reason why we can't. And Johnny, think about this. If one United States senator puts his offices in the VA hospitals, you know what that's going to do for the rest of the country? The veterans in other states are going to be like, hold on a minute, Senator, how come you're not doing the same thing Meluskey is? We can get this all fixed. There's a contract that, like I said, an oath that you took for us. It's just an outright shame that we do not take care of our veterans well. I had a man in California when I was out there for some convention was talking to me about the Spaniard war horses back in the 1700s when they were done, when they were retired from their days of being war horses. They were put out to pasture and treated like royalty. There is something wrong when our men and women of the armed services here in America retire and are kicked out the door and are not treated like the royalty they deserve to be treated as. Something is completely wrong. I know you're probably like me. Your parents taught you if you borrow anything, return it in as good a shape or better. This is outright disgusting and an atrocity that I have to see any of my veterans homeless, that I have to see any of my veterans not being loved or taken care of or not being told when they come home that they are loved, that they are appreciated, and we need to make sure that we're looking out for them as they looked out for us.
Well, that's a very appreciated sentiment, and again, it's not what we as veterans have come to be used to seeing. And, there's going to be folks out there that say, oh,